They say if you're good at something, never do it for free. But apparently that memo never made it to my former boss. My name is Avery Lane. I am 36 years old, born and raised just outside of Denver, Colorado. I specialize in instructional design. Basically, I build systems that help companies train their employees better. Sounds boring to most people, I get it, but I have always loved turning chaos into order, making things make sense. That is what I do. And for nearly 7 years, I did it for a company called BrixonEdge. I gave them my best years, my nights, weekends, and honestly, pieces of my soul. And for a while, I thought it would all be worth it. I thought I was building something. Turns out, I was just being used. I started at BrixonEdge when they were still considered a promising startup. We were small, scrappy, and hungry. I thrived in that kind of environment. There was room to experiment, to make things better, and my ideas actually got heard. But as the company grew, so did the egos, especially one in particular, my manager Ethan Rourke. He was the kind of guy who had mastered the art of talking without saying anything meaningful. Slick suit, fake charm, and an ego big enough to have its own zip code. At first, he seemed harmless. Then he started taking credit for things I had done, little things at first. Then it got worse. I would spend weeks building a new onboarding framework or revamping compliance modules from the ground up. Ethan would wait until the last second, swoop in, and ask for the files. He would skim through them, slap his name on the presentation, and pitch it like it was all his doing. I kept quiet for a while. I told myself it was just part of climbing the ladder, that eventually someone higher up would notice who was really doing the work. But the recognition never came. Only more demands, more files, more silence, and more frustration that I had to swallow every single day just to keep things from falling apart. I knew something was off when he stopped even pretending to be discreet. One afternoon, I was on a call with one of our biggest clients, walking them through a prototype I had built. Ethan sat across the room, listening in. The moment I hung up, he asked me to send over the files just to back things up. 2 days later, I saw him present the exact same material to a different department, claiming he had pulled an all-nighter to build it. I wanted to scream, but instead I smiled through my teeth and told him, "Looks great." I was boiling inside. I started writing things down, dates, conversations, file names, not because I was planning anything just yet, but because I knew I could not trust him anymore. Then came the whispers about Glenmor Industries, a huge opportunity, a chance to lock in a multi-year contract and position BrixonEdge as a national leader in corporate training. Naturally, I was the one tasked with creating the materials. I poured everything I had into it. Late nights, research, custom content. I even hired a voice actor out of pocket to give the modules more polish. Ethan kept saying, "Do not worry, this is your moment." And like a fool, I believed him. But as the presentation date got closer, things started to feel strange. Ethan became unusually secretive. Meetings without me. Emails I was left off of. And then he dropped the bomb. We were offering Glenmor a full-day training workshop for free, a courtesy. I stared at him, stunned. "You want me to give them the entire program I built without charging them?" I asked. He shrugged and said, "It is called investing in relationships." I nearly laughed. I wanted to flip the table. That was not a relationship. That was theft, and I was done being the silent partner in his con. I could feel something shifting inside me. I was no longer scared of what would happen if I pushed back. I was angry. I was tired. I was finished being his personal ghostwriter. My name may not have been on the official presentations, but I knew my work, and soon so would everyone else. Something was coming. I did not know what yet, but I could feel it. Like thunder just before the storm, and this time I was not going to run from it. I was going to meet it head on. I had just wrapped up a late-night revision of the Glenmor Industries proposal when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Ethan. "Quick sync in my office, 10 minutes. No subject line, no details, just enough to send a rush of anxiety straight through my stomach. That was his style, vague and urgent. I grabbed my notes, half expecting another change request or a long list of feedback that I already knew he would spin into his own ideas. But what he said that morning hit me harder than I was prepared for. And honestly, it marked the moment I knew this job was no longer just draining. It was toxic. When I walked into his office, he was standing by the window, arms folded, doing that thing where he stared out like some brooding genius. Without even sitting down, he turned and said, "We are going to run the Glenmor workshop for free." Just like that, no build-up, no context, just dropped it like it was nothing. I blinked, waiting for the part where he smiled and said, "Just kidding." But he was dead serious. "It is a strategic move," he added. "We are offering it as a goodwill gesture to lock in the long-term contract." I stood there frozen, not because I was confused, but because I was trying to keep myself from losing it. That workshop was not just some recycled slide deck. It was 6 weeks of deep research, original content, interactive modules, and case studies tailored specifically to Glenmor's operations. I had written every word. I had mapped out every activity, every metric, every talking point. And now Ethan wanted to just hand it over. No invoice, no acknowledgement, no credit. Just a gift to impress the client. And worse, he was expecting me to deliver it. "Let me make sure I understand," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice even. "You want me to deliver the Glenmor workshop, the one I created, for free?" He nodded like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Clients will remember the gesture," he said. I stared at him for a moment and then replied, "Clients remember value, not charity." That hit a nerve. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened and his eyes narrowed, just slightly. Ethan never liked being challenged, especially by someone he viewed as just staff. He tried to shift gears, started talking fast like he always did when he was losing ground. "It is not forever. It is just this one time. Think of it as planting seeds. Besides, Glenmor is a huge account. If this goes well, they could make us their exclusive training vendor." I wanted to laugh, not because it was funny, but because I had heard that exact line before, 3 times with 3 different clients, and every single time it ended with me working unpaid hours while Ethan soaked up the credit. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "If Glenmor becomes a client, it should be because they trust our work, not because we gave it away like a party favor." He smirked, that fake little half smile that made my skin crawl. "This is how business works, Avery. You play the long game." I bit my tongue hard because what I wanted to say was, "No, this is how you work. Using other people's labor to buy your way into rooms you have no business standing in." But I kept it in, not for his sake, but for mine. I needed time to think. I needed to decide how far I was willing to go. I left his office with my heart pounding and my mind racing. I knew this was not just a bad decision, it was the beginning of something worse. If I agreed to this, it would set a new standard, that my work could be used however he wanted, that my boundaries did not matter. And the truth is, I had already compromised more than I should have. I had given him grace, credit, and silence. But this was different. This crossed a line I did not even know I had until that moment. Back at my desk, I stared at the Glenmor file on my screen. All that effort, all that precision, and now it was just being thrown away as bait. I felt a wave of resentment I could not ignore, and underneath it, a slow-burning clarity. I was not going to do it. Not this time. Ethan thought he could push me like he always had, that I would bend, cave, fold. But he was about to find out he had pushed one time too many, and this time, I was not going to be the one who paid the price. The morning of the Glenmor workshop, I woke up with a pit in my stomach. Not nerves, not anxiety, something heavier. a kind of weight in my chest that told me I was walking into a moment I would not be able to take back. I got dressed like it was any other workday, put on my usual makeup, and stared at myself in the mirror longer than usual. I looked calm, put together, professional, but inside I was done, tired of being quiet, tired of being used, and tired of pretending that what was happening to me was normal. I knew what I had to do, but that did not make it easier. I arrived at Glenmor's headquarters 15 minutes early. I always arrived early. I was that person, the one who double-checked the slides, made sure the room was set up right, reviewed my notes 3 times. Today was no different, except for the storm that was brewing inside me. I walked into the conference room with my laptop and plugged into the screen. The presentation lit up on the wall, custom graphics, interactive segments, every detail carefully built over weeks. The kind of work most consultants charge 5 figures for, and I was about to hand it over for free. Ethan walked in 5 minutes later with his usual fake charm turned all the way up. He was wearing one of his expensive watches and a smug little smirk, acting like this whole thing had been his idea. I barely looked at him. I kept my eyes on the room, watching the Glenmor executives filter in one by one. Then he walked in, Cheng, Glenmor's CEO. Calm presence, sharp eyes, early 40s, and known in the industry for being quietly brilliant. I had built this entire workshop with people like him in mind. Smart leaders who actually cared about improving their systems. And now here I was, about to be pushed aside so someone else could take the credit. As everyone settled in, Ethan introduced the session. We're excited to give you a preview of our latest training strategy, completely complimentary, of course. That was it, my breaking point. The words hit my ears like gunfire. Complimentary, as if none of my time, none of my effort, none of my work had any value. I felt heat rise in my face, and for a second, I thought maybe I should just go through with it. Just finish the day, smile through it, and deal with the fallout later. But then I looked across the table, and Cheng was looking directly at me. Not Ethan, me. As if he knew something was off. As if he could see what was happening behind the curtain. So I stood up. My heart was pounding, my hands were cold, but my voice was steady. I looked straight at Samuel and said, I cannot deliver this today. I was not informed that this workshop would be pro bono, and I cannot support a company that exploits its people. Silence. The entire room froze. Ethan's smile dropped instantly. His head whipped toward me, and he started to open his mouth, probably to do damage control. But I was already packing up my laptop. I did not wait for permission. I did not ask for understanding. I just walked out. The hallway outside felt like a tunnel, quiet and long. I could hear my own footsteps echoing as I moved toward the elevator. My hands were shaking now, but I kept going. I pressed the elevator button and exhaled like I had been holding my breath for years. The doors opened and I stepped inside alone. It was the slowest ride to the lobby I have ever taken, but with every floor we passed, I felt lighter. Like I had finally stopped carrying someone else's lies. Outside, the sun was too bright. The air felt sharp and clean. I got into my car and just sat there for a few minutes, gripping the steering wheel and staring at the dashboard. Part of me wanted to cry, scream, laugh. I was not sure which. I had just burned a bridge, maybe several, but I had also done something I had never done before. I chose myself, not the company, not the job, me. And deep down, I knew it was not the end of the story. Not by a long shot. Something about the way Samuel had looked at me, the way the room had gone quiet. It told me I had not just walked away. I had made an impression, and maybe, just maybe, someone important had finally seen me. I was halfway across the Glenmor parking lot when I heard footsteps behind me. At first, I ignored them, assuming it was another employee heading back to their car, but then I heard a voice, measured, calm, and familiar. Ms. Lane? I turned around. It was Cheng, Glenmor's CEO, standing about 10 feet away. He was not rushed, not flustered, just standing there like he had something important to say. I straightened up, expecting a polite reprimand or maybe a few questions about what had just happened in that boardroom. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and handed me a small, matte black business card. He looked me in the eye and said, "I know this was not your call. Let's talk when you're ready." That was it. No pressure, no judgment, just an invitation. I stared at the card for a second before taking it. His name was printed in silver, clean and simple. No fancy slogans, no corporate fluff. Just contact details and the quiet confidence of someone who knew how to read a room and the people in it. I nodded and said, "Thank you." He gave me a small smile and walked back towards the building like nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Meanwhile, my entire life had just shifted in a single sentence. I sat in my car for a long time, turning the card over in my hand. It felt heavier than it should have, not just in weight, but in meaning. I had no idea what he wanted to talk about, or if it would even lead to anything, but the fact that he had followed me, that he had acknowledged the truth of the situation, that said more than any apology Ethan could have ever given. I did not call him right away. I needed space. I needed to get my head back on straight and decide who I was going to be without BrixonEdge. The next few days were rough. I used up some vacation time, not that I expected it to be approved, but I sent the request anyway. Ethan never responded. HR sent me a form email about unexplained absence and policy reminders. I did not reply. I started journaling again, something I had not done in years. Every page was full of anger, confusion, resentment, but also something else, relief. I did not miss the fake meetings, the forced smiles, the way Ethan hovered around my desk like a hawk before presentations. I missed the work, sure. I missed creating, designing, problem-solving, but not the way it had been stolen from me. 2 weeks passed before I emailed Samuel. I kept it short, just a thank you for the gesture and a note saying I was open to talk. He responded the same day, invited me to lunch, not at Glenmor, but at a quiet little place halfway between our offices. Classy, but not flashy. The kind of place where business gets discussed without anyone looking over your shoulder. I arrived early again. Some habits do not break. He showed up right on time, offered a handshake, and said, "I appreciate you coming." Over lunch, we talked about everything except the workshop at first. He asked about my background, my approach to training development, how I handled teams. He asked smart questions, listened closely, never interrupted. He was nothing like Ethan, and then finally he leaned back and said, "I know what happened that day. Not just what you said, but why you said it. We have worked with BrixonEdge for a long time, and things have not been quite right for months." I nodded slowly, not ready to say too much. But I was listening. Then he said something that caught me off guard. "I would like you to come in as a consultant, independent from BrixonEdge. I want you to help us evaluate our training systems, top to bottom. We need someone who tells the truth, even when it is uncomfortable." I felt my chest tighten. This was not just about offering me a job. It was about recognizing what I had done, what I had walked away from, and why it mattered. I set down my fork, looked him in the eye, and said, "I am interested." We shook hands before leaving. There was no contract yet, no promises, just a conversation and a door quietly opening where another had slammed shut. As I walked to my car, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Hope. Real hope. Not the fake kind that comes with forced gratitude and corporate buzzwords, but the kind that comes when someone finally sees you, not as a tool, not as a resource, but as a person with value. And this time, I was not going to let anyone take that away from me again. When Samuel offered me the consulting role, I knew right away it was not just a courtesy. He was serious. This was not a handout or a favor. It was a real opportunity, and one that came with trust. He wanted me to evaluate Glenmor's entire vendor training ecosystem, top to bottom, and he wanted me to do it independently. No middlemen, no go-betweens, and definitely no Ethan. I took a breath before answering, but inside, I had already made the decision. Yes, I said, I would be honored. That moment felt like someone had cracked open a window in a room I had been trapped in for years. It started with a short-term contract, just 90 days, enough time to assess their current systems and propose solutions. But from the beginning, it was different. The tone, the respect, the clarity. They did not question my invoices or hover over my revisions. They let me work, and for the first time in years, I was building something without having to fight to be heard. I set up shop in a spare room in my house and turned it into a war room. Whiteboards, sticky notes, PDFs, everywhere. It felt like coming home to the kind of work I had always loved but had not been allowed to own. Glenmor gave me access to everything. Current materials, third-party vendor contracts, training portals, onboarding timelines, everything. I could see immediately where the breakdowns were. Outdated modules, redundant slides, compliance gaps that should have been caught years ago. And worse, none of it had been tailored for Glenmor's actual operations. It was all boilerplate, plug-and-play junk. No wonder their department heads were frustrated. They had been investing in a system that did not know them, their products, or their people. What shocked me most, though, was how much of the material was directly tied to BrixonEdge. There were templates I recognized, ones I had created, but they had been watered down, stretched thin, and labeled under Ethan's name. I should have been furious, but honestly, I was not surprised. That was the pattern. Take something good, repackage it under someone else's signature, and squeeze it until it lost all value. But this time, I had a chance to undo that damage. Not with revenge, but with results. I began designing a new framework from scratch, one that aligned with Glenmor's goals and values. I interviewed their regional leads. I sat in on virtual ride-alongs. I took notes on what actually mattered to their people. And slowly, something new began to take shape. A system that was lean, adaptive, and rooted in real experience. Every module I wrote, every case study I developed, felt like a step forward, like reclaiming the years I had spent being sidelined. A few weeks in, I sent Samuel my first progress report. I expected a standard thank you email. Instead, he called me. "This is exactly what we have needed," he said. I showed it to our legal and compliance teams. They are already on board. Hearing that from someone like him, it mattered. Not because I needed praise, but because I needed to know my voice still had weight, that my instincts were not just right. They were essential. People started reaching out. Quiet emails from Glenmor team members who had seen pieces of my work. They thanked me. They said it made sense now, that someone was finally listening. One project manager even wrote, "This is the first time I felt like training was written by someone who gets what we do." That line stayed with me, not because it flattered me, but because it confirmed what I had always believed. Good work speaks, and when it is not filtered through office politics and stolen credit, it actually makes a difference. I was not trying to burn bridges, but I was not going to rebuild them either, especially not with people who had stood on my back to reach higher ground. This was my shot to build something of my own, with integrity, transparency, and actual purpose. And this time, no one was going to rewrite my name off the page. Not again, not ever. What I found shocked even me, and I had seen a lot over the years. But this was not just neglect. It was corporate decay wearing a very expensive suit. I had been digging through Glenmor's vendor training materials for 3 weeks, cross-referencing compliance modules, onboarding content, performance metrics, and post-training surveys. What I uncovered was a mess, a slow, quiet disaster no one had bothered to address. Some of the compliance content had not been updated since 2019. Onboarding videos were still referencing policies that had been retired 2 CEOs ago. And the kicker? Half the material had been recycled from 3 separate vendors, including, of course, BrixonEdge. I laid it all out in my next report. No fluff, no sugarcoating. Just a detailed breakdown of what was outdated, what was redundant, and what was a legal liability waiting to happen. The numbers were ugly. Over 60% of the modules failed to meet current industry standards. Several contained contradictory instructions. One even included links to a third-party site that no longer existed. And the metrics? They had not been touched in 4 fiscal years. I double-checked, hoping maybe I had missed something. I had not. I scheduled a meeting with Samuel and Glenmor's internal operations lead. When I finished presenting, the room went silent. Samuel sat back in his chair, arms crossed, jaw tight. He was angry but composed. You could see it in the way he tapped his pen slowly and rhythmically against the table. Finally, he said, "Fix it, whatever it takes." That was all. He did not ask who to blame. He did not waste time defending bad decisions. He just gave me permission to rebuild. I had never been trusted like that before, not by someone in his position. I went to work immediately. First, I mapped every module against current federal, state, and industry-specific regulations. Then I audited the top-performing training programs from companies that had seen measurable improvements in retention and compliance. I reached out to Glenmor's regional teams and asked real questions. What worked? What failed? What they wish someone had asked 5 years ago. The responses poured in. People were ready for change. They just had never believed it would come from someone who actually listened. One regional director, Melinda, told me flat out, "We have been duct taping these programs for years. Every new hire leaves more confused than when they started." That stuck with me. So I made clarity my first priority. No more jargon. No more 70 slide decks that say nothing. I rewrote everything in plain, actionable language. I added visuals where they mattered. Removed them where they distracted. Every piece of content had a purpose, or it got cut. Next, I tackled the delivery systems. Glenmor had been using 3 different platforms for training. None of them talked to each other. No wonder the analytics were a joke. I recommended a unified platform and got buy-in faster than expected. Apparently, the IT department had been waiting for someone, anyone, to connect the dots. Once the new system was approved, I coordinated with developers to build a dashboard that gave real-time insights into engagement, progress, and test results. For the first time, managers could actually see what their teams were learning or not learning. Samuel checked in weekly, but he never micromanaged. He would ask smart questions, review what needed his signature, then step back and let me lead. I was not used to that. I kept bracing for someone to step in, to take over, to override, but it never happened. And slowly, I started to believe that maybe this was real. Maybe I had finally earned a seat where no one was going to pull the chair out from under me. The more I rebuilt, the clearer it became that the old system had never been designed to serve people. It had been designed to look good in quarterly reviews. BrixonEdge had been a master of packaging mediocrity and somehow charging a premium for it. But that game only works when no one's looking too closely. Well, now someone was. And she was tearing it all down, one broken module at a time. I spent the next 3 months completely rebuilding Glenmor's training ecosystem from the ground up. Nothing was left untouched. I was not just patching holes. I was tearing out rotted beams and laying a whole new foundation. The system had to be modular, scalable, and fully trackable. It had to work for someone sitting at a desk in New York and for someone out in the field in rural Nevada. I wanted clarity, consistency, and performance all built into the framework. And for the first time in years, I was not just surviving my job, I was thriving in it. Tasha Patel from HR quickly became my right hand. She was sharp, direct, and completely no nonsense. The kind of person who could sit through 5 hours of training documentation and still spot the one line that could trigger a legal issue. We hit it off instantly. She had been at Glenmor for 8 years and told me she had never seen the company so open to real change. "You are actually building something that helps people," she said one afternoon over coffee. "Not just ticking boxes." That meant a lot coming from someone who had seen the worst of what training could become: bloated, boring, and forgotten. We started with a pilot rollout in one division, Midwest Logistics. I was nervous, not because I doubted the material, but because I knew that if anything went wrong, it could undermine everything we had worked for. But the feedback came in fast and clear. Managers said onboarding time was cut by nearly 40%. New hires were asking better questions. Safety compliance scores jumped across the board. And perhaps most telling of all, people actually completed the training ahead of schedule, voluntarily. With those results in hand, we expanded to 5 more divisions within 2 weeks. I held training sessions with department heads, walked through the new dashboards, explained how the data worked, and made myself available to answer any questions they had. It was exhausting, but also exhilarating. Everywhere I turned, I could feel the energy shifting. The system was not just a tool, it was becoming a culture change. People were engaging, contributing ideas, asking how they could improve it further. For once, they felt ownership over their own learning. Productivity metrics started to climb. Internal transfer requests increased. People were no longer leaving the company, they were moving into new roles. Attrition, which had been hovering around 20% in some areas, dropped sharply. By the end of month 3, Glenmor's COO called me personally. "We have not seen numbers like this in 5 years," he said. "Whatever you're doing, keep going." That was the moment I realized this was bigger than a contract. This was legacy work, something that would outlast me and Ethan and every recycled template BrixonEdge had ever pushed. But it was more than numbers. I felt it every time someone said, "I finally understand this now," or "Why didn't we do it this way before?" There was a sense of collective relief, like we had been dragging around a broken machine for years and had finally decided to build a better one, and I was the architect. The same woman who had walked out of a conference room, humiliated and furious, was now shaping how thousands of people learned and grew in their careers. That kind of shift does not just happen by accident. It happens when you stop waiting for permission and start building what you believe in. Tasha and I met almost daily by the 3rd month. Our collaboration became the heart of the rebuild. She would bring in field reports, feedback from managers, HR concerns, and together we would adjust the structure to meet real-world needs. I had never worked so hard and never felt so clear. Every module we published, every test we rewrote, every feedback form we revised, it all meant something now. It was not for optics. It was for people. There were moments when I thought about Ethan, not out of bitterness, but with a strange sense of distance, like remembering a storm you once drove through. He had no idea what he had pushed away when he dismissed me. No idea what kind of fire he had lit, because this time, no one was stealing my work, no one was erasing my name, and no one was standing in the way of what I knew needed to be done. I was thriving, and I was just getting started. It started with a ping. One email, then another, and another, all from Ethan. At first, I just stared at the screen, almost amused. His name had not crossed my mind in weeks. I had been too focused on building something that actually mattered. But I guess word travels fast in corporate circles, especially when your biggest client quietly severs a contract and partners with the person you tried to silence. His first email was short, vague, and laced with sarcasm. Something about disappointing conduct and violations of implied obligations. I rolled my eyes. I did not respond. The second message was longer, angrier, and came with an official-sounding letter attached. It accused me of breaching intellectual property agreements. He claimed I had stolen proprietary methods and internal frameworks developed under BrixonEdge. I laughed out loud. Those same so-called proprietary methods were templates I had written, optimized, and delivered, without a single word of credit. Ethan had no real claim, just a bruised ego and a loud keyboard. Still, I forwarded the message to Glenmor's legal department just to be safe. Mark Donnelly, Glenmor's in-house counsel, called me directly the next morning. His voice was calm, but I could tell he was irritated, more at the nuisance than the threat. "I have reviewed Ethan's letter," he said. "It is a poorly worded bluff. Not only is there no proprietary content used here, but most of what he references was never formally registered, protected, or even documented under their own internal standards." In other words, Ethan was throwing mud, hoping something would stick. Mark told me to ignore him and let their legal team handle it. "We are not just backing you," he said. "We are defending what you have built here." A week later, Mark sent me a copy of Glenmor's official response. It was brilliant, firm, factual, and so dryly professional it probably gave Ethan a migraine. They walked point by point through each of his claims, dismantling them with precision. At one point, they included a screenshot of a BrixonEdge training slide Ethan had submitted, which had clearly been copy-pasted from a public government website. Mark had highlighted the footer that read, "Free to reuse with attribution." No attribution, of course. I laughed again. I had spent years watching Ethan bluff and posture, but this was the first time he was being dismantled in full daylight. I will admit there was a small part of me that enjoyed it. After everything, the gaslighting, the theft, the manipulation, seeing him flail and grasp at control was a strange kind of justice. Not revenge exactly, just balance. He had built his success on other people's backs. Now, without someone like me to cover his blind spots, the cracks were showing. I heard through a former colleague that BrixonEdge was struggling to hold on to their remaining clients. Contracts were drying up. Morale was tanking. People were leaving. The ones who stayed were updating their resumes on their lunch breaks. Ethan sent one more email. This one was almost pathetic. He tried to be civil, said he regretted how things ended, and hoped we could find a mutually respectful path forward. I did not respond to that one either. There was nothing left to say. He had made his choices. I had made mine. And frankly, I had no intention of revisiting the past. Not when the future I was building was this solid. What struck me most during all of this was how calm I felt. There was no panic, no fear. A year earlier, I might have crumbled under the pressure of legal threats, especially from someone who used to have power over me. But now, with a real team behind me and work I believed in, I did not even flinch. I was not alone. And I was not defenseless. Glenmor had my back because I had earned it. With results, not promises. With integrity, not politics. Tasha and I joked about it later. "You know, he probably thought you would come crawling back," she said over lunch one day. I smiled and shook my head. "He never understood what I was actually capable of," I replied. "And now, he never will." There was something freeing about that, about closing a door that had been cracked open for too long. Ethan's meltdown was loud, messy, and public. But mine? Mine was quiet, powerful, and unshakable. I did not need to scream. I just needed to keep building. There are moments in life that feel like they were written in a script, like the universe was waiting for you to be ready before it handed you the perfect scene. This was one of those moments. I had been invited to speak at Glenmor's annual strategy summit, an event that brought together their board of directors, division heads, partner companies, and a few select guests. My name was on the program. I was scheduled to present right after the opening keynote. The topic? The transformation of Glenmor's training infrastructure. It was not just a presentation, it was recognition. The summit was held at a sleek downtown hotel, the kind with velvet chairs, shining floors, and coffee that cost $12 a cup. As I walked through the glass doors that morning, my nerves were balanced by a strange calm. I had earned my place here. Tasha met me in the lobby with a badge and a smile. "You're ready for this," she said. "They're going to love it." I believed her. We had spent the last few weeks gathering data, building slides, refining the message. This was not fluff. This was proof of impact. As I stepped into the main ballroom, I scanned the room casually and froze. Near the back wall, behind the last row of chairs, was a man in a dark blazer. His posture was tight, his face pale. Ethan, my former boss, my saboteur, my unwanted ghost from a company I had left behind. I blinked once to make sure it was really him. He was not on the guest list. He did not have a badge. He looked lost, confused, as if someone had dropped him into a room where he no longer belonged, because truthfully, he did not. I turned back toward the stage. Focus. I had a job to do. The moderator introduced me formally. Please welcome Amanda Lane, Glenmor's executive training consultant and architect of the Glenmor Learning Initiative. That title, executive training consultant, landed like a drumbeat in my chest. I stepped up, smiled at the crowd, and clicked the first slide. The lights dimmed. My voice filled the room. Good morning, my name is Amanda Lane. Over the past year, I have worked closely with Glenmor's leadership to rebuild, redesign, and reimagine how we train and support our people. I paused, scanned the room, and let my eyes land, briefly but deliberately, on Ethan. I made direct eye contact. No malice, no performance, just calm power. He broke the stare first, looked at the floor, then at the exit. Less than 3 minutes into my presentation, he slipped out the side door. I did not stop. I did not stumble. I barely registered the door closing behind him. Because honestly, he was no longer the point. What mattered was the audience in front of me. The leaders nodding as I showed before and after numbers. The CFO leaning forward when I explained how we cut onboarding time by 27%. The head of operations taking notes as I talked about our scalable micro-learning pilots. By the time I reached the final slide, the room erupted into applause. Real applause. Not polite, not staged, just honest appreciation. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to really feel it. Afterward, people came up to ask questions, shake my hand, and thank me. A few said they had never seen such clear alignment between training and performance outcomes. One executive asked if I would be willing to present to their global teams in the fall. Another asked if I had ever considered writing a book. I laughed at that one, but something inside me lit up. I was not just recovering from the mess Ethan made. I was evolving into something more. Later, as I was packing up my laptop, Tasha leaned over and whispered, "Did you see him?" I nodded. "He saw what he needed to see," I said, "and I doubt he'll come back." We both smiled. It was not about revenge. It was about truth and standing in it. Walking back to my car that day, I realized something I had not fully understood before. Closure does not always come in confrontation. Sometimes it comes in the quiet confidence of showing up, speaking clearly, and letting your work speak louder than any lie ever could. That day, I stood on the stage Ethan had always tried to claim for himself, and I did not just take it, I owned it. I never thought I would end up here, not in a million years. I am not on Glenmor's payroll, but I might as well be. I am on contract with full executive authority over all things related to learning and development. I report directly to Samuel now. No middle managers, no approval chains. If a vendor wants to work with Glenmor, they go through me. If a program is not working, I pull it. I approve budgets, select platforms, interview vendors, and shape strategy. I do not ask for permission anymore. I give it, and it feels good, not in a smug, look at me now kind of way. It just feels right, like justice, but quieter. Glenmor has changed too. The entire training culture has shifted. Managers now treat development like a growth tool instead of a compliance box. New hires walk into orientation and leave with real knowledge, not a stack of unread PDFs. Department heads bring ideas to me, not requests. They know I listen, and they know I do not play games. It took time to earn that trust, but once it clicked, everything accelerated. We even started getting inquiries from Glenmor's partners, asking if I could consult with them too. One of them offered me a full-time executive role. I politely declined. I have no desire to chain myself to one desk again. I like my freedom. I like building, scaling, moving. And then there is BrixonEdge. They are still around technically, but barely. Since Glenmor pulled their contract, I have heard through the grapevine that they have lost 3 major clients. One of them cited inconsistent delivery in their exit memo. Another mentioned intellectual property concerns. I wonder where they got that language. I have not spoken to Ethan since the day he walked out of the summit ballroom. I doubt I ever will. Last I heard, he had stepped down voluntarily and taken a leave of absence. A friend who still has contacts in that circle told me Ethan is consulting independently now. Funny, that is what I am doing too. The difference is, I earned it. A few months ago, I got a message on LinkedIn. It was from Carly, one of the junior trainers I had mentored back at BrixonEdge. She was good, sharp, but always nervous under Ethan's micromanagement. Her message was short and honest. Hey Amanda, I heard about what you have been building at Glenmor. Any chance you are hiring? Would love to reconnect. I sat with the message for a minute, just staring at it. Not because I was unsure, but because it was one of those full circle moments you do not want to rush. Then I replied, let's talk. I have a few upcoming projects that might be a great fit for your skill set. We set up a call. I told her what I was working on, and she lit up. It reminded me of how I felt when Samuel handed me his card in the parking lot all those months ago. Someone saw value in me, and now I was paying that forward. I sent Carly a contract later that week. Fair rate, full transparency, creative control, everything we never had under Ethan. Now Carly works on one of our remote learning pilots. She sends me weekly updates, not to impress me, but because she is excited. She is doing great. And I trust her. That is what I have learned through all of this. People thrive when they are trusted, supported, and given the chance to grow. Not squeezed, not manipulated, not used. Looking back, the day I walked out of that boardroom with my laptop bag over my shoulder felt like a loss. But now I see it was the beginning of something much bigger than I could have imagined. I thought I was burning a bridge. Turns out I was clearing a path. And the best part? Now I am the one holding the card.